Hi, welcome to part two of the Atten at Home uh, webinar series. We're really excited to bring these to you. We're just going to get started, and if for anybody who's joining late, not to worry, we'll be recording this webinar and sharing the recording later. I'm just going to help set the table before passing the baton over to Brent. So let me just quickly share my screen and get started. Sweet. Just a quick note: if anybody's having trouble seeing my screen and they're seeing it as a little icon on their desktop, just click that little icon and it should go full screen for you on the Zoom. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to use the chat, and I'll help as Brent goes through his talk. Just a quick note about me. My name is Joe Crespo. I'm Director of Accounts here at Atten Design Group. I've been building websites for about 20 years, started as a graphic designer, pivoted to web development, became a project manager, and now I do business development for Atten. I've been working with Atten for about 7 years. Atten's been around for 20. We're a full-service digital agency. We provide strategy, design, and development for mission-driven organizations. We have a very simple founding principle that we employ on all of our projects, and that is some stories just need to be heard. And our job as a digital agency is to help amplify our clients' voices so they can cut through the noise and connect meaningfully with their audiences. And after 20 years, Atten works with some of the most amazing mission-driven organizations in the world. We believe we do our best work when we're doing work that matters. Okay, that is everything I have in terms of introductions. I'm going to pass this over to Brent. But before you take over, I just want to say again, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you click that and ask any questions, they'll come right to me, and I'll be sure to put those questions to Brent at the end of his presentation. Great. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Brent, this is all you.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And let me share my screen. Here we go. Welcome to my webinar. And like Joe mentioned, my name is Brent Robbins, and I'm a front-end developer at Atten. And today I'd like to show you an easy way to integrate your React apps in your Drupal site. And when I say React, I'm referring to any JavaScript or library. React is just the main JavaScript library we use here at Atten. Also, apps that I'm referring to, those are the ones that can be integrated in a Drupal page. This is known as a progressive decoupled versus a React app that requires an entire page and also requires routes. That would be a fully decoupled app, and typically those are hosted on a separate site. There are many ways to add React apps to Drupal, but I wanted to find a module that could do a bit of the work for me and also add some extra functionality. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you guys a few questions to get to know everyone's background. So, Joe, if you wouldn't mind helping me run the polls. The first question is, what is your Drupal skill level? So from beginner, intermediate, or expert.
Yeah, we're just waiting for one or two more holdouts.
Okay, let's see the results. So most of you guys are intermediate, but we have a few experts and novice and some people without any experience. That's great. Next question is, what is your React skill level? So either beginner, intermediate, or expert. And the other thing to note while answering these questions, I've designed this webinar to work for most beginner level users, but also included some useful information for intermediate to advanced users. Okay, results are in, and most of us are intermediate or novice. Okay, that's awesome. And the third question is, have you ever integrated React with a Drupal site, and specifically progressively decoupled? So the app would need to be within the page and not a fully decoupled app. Okay, so most of you are not familiar yet with integrating it, but we have a few that have and said that it's challenging. And then finally, I mean, it's the last question. If you have, please let me know your experience. So it was either easy with no problems, it was okay, but challenging, or you haven't yet. And results. So majority haven't yet, but then a few have, but it's challenging. Okay, so let's close the polls now. So now that we have a better understanding of everyone's skill level, let's take a look at how it's done. This webinar isn't a slide-driven presentation, but more of a screen sharing tutorial, watching me highlight this useful module and how you can use it in your next project. Also, to save everyone time, uh, everything has been set up in advance, so you don't have to spend the time watching the super exciting process of me downloading and enabling a module or downloading node packages or clearing cache. So let me close that out and let's move on to screen sharing. Okay. So,
Oh, Brent, I have a request. Do you mind just turning off your video? I think that some
yeah.
people.
Yeah, I was gonna, thanks for reminding me. Okay, so introducing the JS component module. This module can be found by visiting drupal.org/project/JS_component. The module was created by Travis, a fellow developer here at Atten, and I've personally used the module on client projects and have found it easy to set up and very useful. I was first introduced to this module last year when working on the new Commonwealth Fund website. The challenge was to make it easy for the Commonwealth Fund to add React apps to pages that we developed for them, but also it was required for us to give them the ability to specify which type of chart to show and also give them the ability to customize some settings. And another feature, they would like the ability to add multiple React apps per page. So this is the home page, and you can see we're using JS component, and the settings like what initial races to view, and even the areas, the client has the ability to set that up. And this is a indicator page, and you can see here we have 4 different React apps on one page using JS component, but they're actually all the same React app. And when using JS component, we can pass down the appropriate settings to show a specific chart and settings. Let's go back to the Let's actually go to the demo. This is, in this webinar, I'm going to be showing you the simple steps that you need to follow to add JS component and add your React apps to your site. We're going to be using this demo site that essentially just has JS component added to it. There's nothing fancy. It's not a very attractive site, but it proves the point on how easy it is to leverage JS component and add your React apps to your site. Let's head back to Travis's module page. So this is the JS component module page again, and this module gives you the ability, I'm going to zoom in so you can read this a little bit easier. So this module gives you the ability to add React app or any other JavaScript app to your Drupal 8 site using the libraries directive. This is where you define the component or components for multiple apps, which includes the JavaScript and CSS files for each app.
Hey, Brent, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm getting a lot of communication from folks who are in the webinar having a hard time seeing your screen. Do you mind turning off and turning on your screen sharing just to see if we can go full screen automatically for the people who are having difficulty?
Sure. I just turned it off and let's try again. How about now?
It went full screen for me. Okay, I'm hearing good feedback from people. If you're still having trouble seeing it, please let me know in the chat. Okay, Brent, sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no worries. We haven't got to like any code or anything, but definitely would like for everyone to be able to see the screen. Okay. Let me find where I was at. Okay, so like I was mentioning, this leverages the libraries directive, and this is where you define the components for the React apps, which includes the JavaScript and CSS files. And you can see that here in a example that Travis added. And it also, you can define the root ID, and that is where you'd want to mount your React app to the page. And this gives you the ability to add multiple React apps on a single page by using unique root IDs. The JS component you create is added can be added as a new custom module or added to your site's custom theme. On the modules page, it gives you an example of the JS component YAML file. So this is the custom module that you create, or when you add this to a theme, it's very simple. It's powered by this .js_component.yaml file. And this is a nice fully fleshed out example of what's required. So once you set up your JS component, you'll be able to add your React app as a block. With the React app exposed as a block, you can add it using the Manage Blocks page and Layout Builder as a paragraph using the Paragraphs block module, or you can code it directly into a twig file. Another feature of this module is the ability to create custom settings that are passed down to your React app using the Drupal settings object in the DOM. These settings are configurable in the YAML file. When you're adding or configuring the block in Drupal's UI, you'll see the fields and you'll be able to add or change those values. And again, in this example, you can see right here, we have the settings, and this is optional. You don't have to use settings, but we are collecting one setting, and it's using a select, and we have a title for a description, and these are the options. And in this second example, we have just a single setting. You can have multiple settings, but this setting is for, the example is for like the header title, and it's a text field. And this is the title of the field and the description. So some like help text.
Brent, could you toggle your screen share one more time? We're having some other people are having some problems with the video reverting.
Is it that one issue that McKenna said that they have to click on it to toggle it? I'm wondering.
So there is, if you do see a small screen share icon, if you're
That's
an
the issue.
attendee watching then now yeah, I can see it. Also, if you're on a Mac, just a quick note: the Zoom screen that's being shared may not be on the current desktop that you're using. So be sure to swipe left and right to make sure that we're not sharing a screen on a desktop that's out of view. Again, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. Yeah. Can everyone just let Joe know if you can see it? Because it is important, obviously, to be able to see the screen. Okay, so let's see, where were we at? So next we'll cover how to install the module and set it up. And let's head on over to VS Code. And obviously you can use any code editor and any terminal, it doesn't matter. It's just a little easier to share everything in one using VS Code. To install the module, you can just follow the typical steps that you would install any Drupal module on a site, and then just enable it. There's nothing special that you need to do. For this demo, I have already gone ahead and I have downloaded it and enabled it. And so in the modules folder in contrib, you can see I have JS component added. And the module doesn't include a UI, so the only way to leverage the module is by creating your own JS component by adding it to your custom theme or adding it to a custom module. Now that we have JS component ready, I'll first demonstrate how to use this module by creating a simple custom module. To get started creating your own custom module, I just added a new directory to modules/custom, and I titled it JS_component_example, and you can see that here. And within this directory, we have two files that are required. We have the .info file, and we have the JS_component.yaml file. So sorry, JS_component YAML file. These two files are set up. The first one is the .info file, and this essentially stores the metadata for the custom module, just like any module in Drupal. What you see is essentially just boilerplate. There isn't anything special or unique added here. We just have to make sure we add the dependency to JS component, and you can give it a unique title and a description. So that's just the main things to be aware of when creating the .info file for the custom module. So pretty simple. Then the second file that's required is the JS component YAML file. So let's open that up, and you can see I'm following the typical Drupal module convention, where the name of the module is being used for the .info file and for my JS_component.yaml file. So that's why I named them that. So let's open up the JS component YAML file where everything's set up. So in this YAML file, I have two components set up. I have and they have identifiers. So we have a component_1 and component_2. And I've added a label, a description, a unique root ID, and then this is the libraries directive. So this is where you define the JavaScript and CSS files. And then in my second component, I have the same thing. I have a second React app, and it's using a different ID. And the reason behind that is so I can add it to I can add it to the same page, which is pretty cool. And so I have the components set up, and the nice thing is with the JS component module, and if we look at that module in the README, just like you saw on the modules page, we can see an example of the YAML file. So you could literally just like copy this and paste that into your JS component YAML file. And the settings aren't required. I've added settings in my second example, but in this first example component, it's just the basics essentially. So it's nice to have all these components set up, but of course we need to have apps to power them. And all those apps are organized in a components directory. That isn't required. You can organize it however you like. I could have had the React app and React app 2 in the root of my custom module directory. It's just a little bit more tidy if I add it in a components directory. So that's just, that's optional. These two React apps, to create a quick demo, I chose the tool Create React App, and that just allows me to create a quick and dirty, just simple React app. And it is a fairly common method. However, there are other ways to create React apps, obviously using just Webpack or Parcel, and even other ways too. But I wanted to use Create React Apps since it's fairly common, and there's some tweaks that you need to be aware of to make this work well with this JS component setup. And so let's hop into one of these React apps. So we have this, the first one is just React-app, and scaffold it with the Create React App tool. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but the first thing you should be aware of when using Create React App is it assumes that you're running the app in the root of your site. And since it's doing that, or assuming that, and your apps are obviously not on the root of your site, the files aren't, even if you're showing the app on the homepage, your files, your build files aren't located there. You need to specify where that homepage is. And to do so, in the package.json file, you just need to add the homepage. And so you can see here, I've already done that. And so this is, from the root of your Drupal site, the location of the build directory. And that's what you want to update. And again, Create React App out of the box assumes that this build directory is sitting at the root of your site, and it isn't. So we need to add this line right here. And so now this correctly points to this build directory file. And if you didn't update that, any files referenced, like images, they wouldn't load. Another thing you might want to change in your React app is the .getignore file that's added with Create React App. And let's open that up. By default, the build directory is being ignored. And unless you have a continual integration step or process, or you're manually going into the server and building your app on the server, without this build directory, your React app isn't going to, the build files for your React app, they're not going to live on your live site. Obviously, using version control. So out of the box, Create React App is ignoring that build directory. And that's fine. Like I mentioned, if you have some integration step or if you're manually building it, But for like the most simple sites, you probably aren't, and it probably is okay just to comment this out or delete it, and then just allow the build files to be added to your version control. So that's one thing to note, because like this would work locally, but then once you push this to your server, you wouldn't be able to see your React app. Next, let's run npm run start. So let's just demo the app really quick, so you can see it running. So the first thing we should do is in the terminal, let's go to this path. So we're inside the directory of that particular React app. So let's just do npm run start just to demo the app locally, and this is always a good idea. And let's move back to the browser. And I'll push this over here. Okay, so you can see the create React app. So nothing, different or out of the ordinary with any create React app. I think I updated some text, and that's about it. So that's just a good idea to test the app first locally before you start adding it to Drupal. So you want to make sure it works here. The other thing to note is when you updated the homepage with this little local server that npm run start is using, it'll also mirror that path here. So you just want to make sure everything's working in your React app, and then you can. So we're just going to kill the server with Control-C, and then after we've tested, made sure everything's running right, now we can generate the build files. So to do so, you would run npm run build, and then once you've done that, it'll just create all of the files, JavaScript files, HTML files, CSS files, and add it into this build directory. And so let's minimize this so we can get a little bit more real estate here. So in the build directory, when you open that up, the first thing you want to do is probably check out where all your CSS and JavaScript files are, and that is generated in this directory called static. So we have the CSS directory, and all of your files are created here, and they have this randomly generated string here, and that's what I'm referencing with my my YAML file. So let's just quickly open that back up. So that's the file name that I'm referencing. Out of the box, create React app creates these files with this randomly generated string here to identify when it's been updated. And so we have it done for the CSS. We've done it, or it adds it for the chunk file, which that is React DOM, and also the main, which the main is, so this one, main is your custom React code in here in this file. And then finally, this runtime main with the random generated string. This is just this is React, the React library, like all of it right here, which is nice. And if you don't know what's being used or referenced when you view your app or use your React app, a trick is to just go to index.html. And this is all that's necessary to run your React app. And here we can ignore some of these files that are being referenced, like the favicons. Obviously, we're going to be, since we're adding it to Drupal, it's going to be using Drupal's favicon. We don't need a few of these other things, but what we do need is where it starts with your CSS file. So right here, this kind of is a nice little cheat sheet to tell you what files that you need to run your app. So we have our CSS file, And for the index file, it doesn't add the JavaScript or the React library as a file, but it adds that in this script right here. So all of this is in what's added to that runtime, which is it's good to know because the file isn't being referenced, so you might not necessarily know that. But this is the React framework. And then the second file is React DOM, and the last one is your custom React script. And this will vary, if you change and build out your React app. This is just out of the box. This is just what it looks like. So let's open up the directory so we can see everything. So once you know what CSS files and JavaScript files are necessary for your particular app, you'd go back to the JS component YAML file, and you would paste in the appropriate location. So like theoretically, let's say you copied and pasted from Travis's the README example for JS component. And then from here, you would want to replace obviously the location and the file name, because the random string might be different. So you would update that. And when you're referencing the file, you would start with where it's located in the custom module and then within the subdirectory. So you start here, you wouldn't start at the root of the Drupal site. So that's important to note. So once you've updated the JavaScript and CSS files, you should have everything that's necessary to add this to your Drupal site. So once that's set up, the next step you'll want to do is add this to your Drupal site. But before that, we get into that, one thing I want to highlight, and as far as like a special case, is using Create React App, is those randomly generated strings and getting consistent file names to make this whole step easier. And what I mean by that is using Create React App, whenever you change, like let's say you changed the version of React, this would change. React DOM, this would change. Your CSS, this would change. And your custom React code, this string would change. And then every time you run npm run build, you'd have to go in here and update that string. And that can be kind of tedious or a pain. And so the trick is for that, so let's close that. Let's head back to our React app. Is in your Create React app, leverage the post build step in your npm run or your package.json file. And what I mean by that is, let's close that. Let's look at your package.json. After you run in your scripts, after you run build, if you have a post build step, that will be triggered. And so to leverage this solution, you would add this following line right here. So you would add a post build step, and this would be auto triggered after the build is done. So you don't have to run npm run post build or anything. You just do your normal npm run build, and this post build script will be triggered. And this is a shell file, bash file, and you would add this post build.sh file inside your React app. And then you would add, or actually before you add that, since it's a bash file, you would want to make sure that this file is executable. So you would run chmod 755 and then postbuild.sh in this directory. So you have to make sure that this is executable. And then once that's executable, then you would add something like this. I can zoom in a little bit. So how this works is it will look for each line, each file. The first one is the runtime, and the runtime is, again, that's React's library file. And then it'll copy that, and then it'll rename it a consistent name. So I want to just use runtime. And same thing with main, same thing, which is React DOM, and then chunk is your custom React code, and then your CSS file. So all of these, you can see it'll find it with this little asterisk. It finds it, copies it, and renames it for you, which is super handy, because then after you have this in place, then in your going back to the YAML file, the JS component YAML file, you can now, not the info file, the YAML file, you can use consistent names. So then what we would do is just update this. Instead of every time you update it, you would have to update this. We can just change it to the consistent name. So this would be runtime. This would be just chunk. This would be main. And if you don't like these names, obviously you could name it whatever you like. You could call this React, you could call this React DOM, and then you could call this my app or something. So that's completely up to you. But once you run, let's run npm run build again. So npm run build. Let's zoom out a little bit. So it's going to build your React app as normal, but you can see with that post build script, it adds kind of like a little console notification of what it's done. And so it's copied that file, and then in the same location added a new one that with the same code, but with the new name. So that's all done for you. And then since we've updated that in our component file, the next time we update our code in React or update the version of React or any of that, that will be just fine. And we don't ever have to come back here and change those random strings, which is super handy. So this is the reason why I chose to demo Create React App, because there are these little gotchas. And this isn't just with using JS component. This would be with any type of solution. You would need something like this to handle it with your Drupal site and connecting your React files. So now that we have that in place, we can actually add our React app to our site. And so let's move over back to the browser. And so here's our demo. And the first thing you would want to do before you added the block to the page is you would have to go and enable the custom module you've created. So you'd go to extend, and then you would find your JS component custom file, whatever you've named it. So I had named it just JS component example, and it's already enabled for this demo. So first thing you want to do is make sure that's enabled. And then the next thing is, so let's go back to the homepage. So we have one React app already added to our page. So let's add another one. And specifically, let me show you. Let's add our second component. So the second component is a little different. And so let's add that. And to do so, the easiest way is going to structure, block, layout. And then it's just like any block. So there's nothing really different. You find the area you want to add the block. You can see that there's a JS component React block already added here, but we're going to add another one to demonstrate that we can actually add multiple React apps to a page. And so if I use the search or just scroll down, I can see my React component too. So I'm going to place that. And since it's just, a standard block, you still have all these visibility settings. So I'm going to restrict this to just the front page. So front, and I'm going to save it. And so everything's saved. So let's go back to the site. And we can see our other React apps. So we have 2 React apps. We have our, and I kept the title, the block title, so you could see. So we have our my React component 2 and the initial one that was already added. So it successfully was able to add 2 React apps very easily to the page. So now that we have that in place, let's talk about the JS component settings. And so for our first example, there aren't any settings, which is fine. And the second example, I included 2 settings. And you can see the settings. I've identified them with this like ID of React underscore theme. And this React underscore theme is a select. And then the second one is React title, and that's a text field. And just to let you know how that works is, or if you're ever interested in seeing what other options you have for those fields, if you go to the Drupal API for elements, the form and render elements, you can search here and see what type of options you have. So you could use a text area. So if you wanted a bunch of text, you could do that. This is our simple text field, so a simple string text field. And then if we go back, the first page has, so we have number, radios, and we have select. So if you ever aren't aware of what options you have available, you can find that here at api.drupal.org/API/Drupal/elements. Let's go back to our code. So we have our first example, that React theme that's using a select. I have 2 options, and this is the key. So this is the value that we're going to be receiving. That's going to be sent down to us via the DOM, and then this is the label. And then we have an empty option. And then the second setting that I've added is the React title. And this is just a very simple demonstration, but just to prove and show you how easy this is to set up. And once you see this in action, you might kind of think about some different ways you can leverage this in your React app. But so we have these 2 settings, and we had this setting in that example that we just added. I just kind of skipped it really quick. So now that we've kind of covered how we can add settings to your JS component, let's actually just edit this block, and I'll show you what it looks like. So if you just configure your block, and I won't hide it this time, we have our JS component settings. So we have our React theme, and in the theme, I have light or dark. So let's pick dark, and then I'm just going to give it a title of Create React App Component 2. So there's some text there. And I'm going to save the block. And if we scroll down, we can see we have now it's themed dark, and we actually have the title. If you quickly just go back and pick the light theme, you can see that it has this light theme here. And so that's just to kind of show you how easy it is to set up those those settings, and Drupal can leverage them. Let me show you with inspect how it's passed down. So if you open it up, inspect, and click console and type in, let me zoom this in a little bit. So so Drupal settings, there's some settings that Drupal just passes down. But within that, this JS component module adds some values, and we can see that kind of like being hinted here. So if we type settings, and you can see underneath the little hint here, it shows we have 2 on this page. So we have the React theme and the React title. So we could just type in React theme, dark or light, and then React title is the title that we added. So in your React app or a JavaScript app, you can just look at the the DOM, so window dot exactly this, and you can get that value. And this doesn't have to be just a string. You could put objects in there, so you could have some complex content that's being passed down, which is really handy, or array of values too. This is just a really simple example. So now you can see like how the React apps get that data. So the last way of adding the JS component is using your custom theme. So let's hop on over really quick to our code, and let's see how I've set it up. And again, I've already set it up in advance just to save time. So within themes and in custom, I have like the world's most simple theme. So in the YAML file, or the .info file, this isn't required for JS component. I just want to show you like this is just a really basic theme, and that's, you know, really don't have to have a complex special theme to add JS component to. You could add this to any theme, and really the only thing that we need to do to add JS component to our theme is again add a .js underscore component .yaml file. So this is the same exact method that we used in the custom module. It's just you'd want to name this the theme name. So my demo theme is just the Drupal, or sorry, React underscore demo. So then I just need to label the JS component YAML file React underscore demo dot JS underscore component dot YAML. And you can see I've added a third. This is our third component, and it has some settings, and then the same type of setup here is being used, and I just have one React app in here. So in components, I just have one little demo React app, and I have the same setup where I'm using the post build, and I'm using consistent files to make it easier for development. The other thing that I think I failed to mention is it is important to have these in that same order that you saw in the index.html. So you need to run React first, React DOM, and then your React custom code. So there's nothing different from this component file, other than I did change the root ID. And one other thing, when you do change the root ID here, you do need to update your ID in your actual app. So you might forget that. So just to remember, like once you do customize this, and typically React apps are mounted to just root, but when you change that specifically for create React app, you would just go into source, and then in the in index.js, we have the get element by ID. This is where React mounts your app to. You would change it here. So now it's referencing the right ID. And then another thing that I like to update is in the build, or sorry, not in build, but in public, I would update it here as well. So when you're testing it, if you updated it in your code, but you didn't update it in this public directory, then it's not updated. The test wouldn't work. So we would just need to update it here. Then when we run npm run start, then it would work. So when you're doing your local development, you can get your, you can see your React app. So now that we have our JS component added to our theme, let's add it to this separate page. So we have this blank page that we need to add of course, we need to add a React app to. And so same thing, just go to structure, block layout, and then content, place block, and then we have our React theme demo. That's what I've titled it. You can see it's a JS component. And we have settings, so we can just throw in some content here, and then visibility settings. So let's make sure it just shows on that specific page. So it's just React. So save it. And let's head back to the site and refresh. And we see our app. So great. Yeah, that wraps up my code along tutorial. So let's head back to my slide deck. So let's go back to that. I'm gonna share that. So I appreciate you attending this webinar, and I hope you enjoyed getting to know the JS component module. There are other ways, obviously, to add React or any JavaScript app to your Drupal site, but I really encourage you to try out this module. And I created very recently, so if you see anything that needs to be changed, please let me know. Create a PR or just email me. But there is this example code repo, and inside this repo, you have 2 folders that have a demo for the custom theme and a custom module with a very simple React app demo. And of course, there's a README to kind of walk you through how to add it. But since you've watched this webinar, you know exactly how to do it. So at this time, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions.
Awesome. So if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen, turn on your video. And there's been a lot of questions coming in as you were talking. So I'm going to start with a question from Salvador. How to config to load external React and React DOM, like from a different server.
From the same server, you mean?
It looks like, I mean, Salvador, please forgive me if I'm butchering the question, but is this a question? It seems like a question of, if I have React on a CDN or a third-party server, how can I load the build files?
If you are using a CDN, you can use external. It's the libraries directive that like the theme uses or any custom module uses. So you can reference external CDN files as well.
Okay, great.
If that's the question.
Yeah, if you have a follow-up or any other additional questions or unrelated to this, please ask them, and we'll answer them with the time that we have allowed. And if we run out of time, we'll follow up directly. The next question is, we also have on this call, on the webinar, we have Travis Tomka, who's a maintainer of the JS component module. And Travis, this might be a question for you. This question from a former colleague, Peter. The JS component YAML seems like it's doing the same work as the library's YAML file. Besides the custom variables and labels, why not use libraries.yaml? And Brent, if you want to answer that, if you want to take that question, feel free, or kick it out to Travis.
For just quickly, for me, for my sake, I found it easier to organize. Like, there are other tutorials. Lullabot has a really good one, how to create a custom module, creates it as a block. It does pretty much kind of the same thing other than the settings. It's just, there's a lot of like coding and work that needs to be done to do that versus just leveraging a module that just has it ready for you. That was a nice thing. Like, I don't want to spend a ton of time creating a custom module or adding a ton of other boilerplate. Like, a lot of the work's done for me, and the settings option for the example for the Commonwealth, we heavily relied on that. So it was super helpful. And it was really nice to give the flexibility to our client to be able to quickly add React blocks and configure those React blocks to any page. And then Travis.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that sounds like a good tactical question from my perspective on a particular project. But Travis, why? I guess what led you to in this direction to architect the module this way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here, let me go in. I'm Travis Tomka. I work here at Atten. I'm a backend developer. So I am a maintainer on the JS components module, and like the real idea behind why we went with using this type of like plugin system opposed to just using the libraries is that we're kind of mashing the two up with blocks. So we have getting the library from the React application and then being able to define the React application in a block and then get those settings to the React application. So that's what the total difference between the two are. And I think that's the reason that we chose this approach. It's more of a mashup.
Cool. Peter, if that doesn't answer your question, I'm happy to follow up with you afterward. The next question is a question for you, Brent. Is there a post build for Windows?
So if I was on a Windows setup, because all of this has to be run with on Node, I wonder if that .sh file would still run on like native Windows, but I think more modern Windows development is all used on that Linux subsystem, like can't remember what it's called, but that would work. I would assume that would work because this is all, I mean, Mac is all Unix-ish based. And so I think that post-build script would work. I haven't tested it on Windows. I do have one, but I haven't tested it on yet, but I would assume it would. Travis, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
We'll follow up with you on afterward. I think it is a great question. I think typically we're using Macs and have Drupal VM, Docker setups for our development. Is that accurate, or am I just making things up? I can sometimes make things up.
Yeah, I think almost everyone here at Atten uses a Mac, but I mean, it could run in Linux or Unix. All this same setup could. So, and yeah, like I was mentioning, like a lot of the development now on Windows, people are using that layer of Linux over their development.
Great. Next question does each React component have its own namespace in Drupal settings? That is, if you had two blocks, could they each have their own React title? I guess that question came in early, so maybe that was answered in this webinar or no? If you had two blocks on the same page, could they have their own title?
So from what I've seen, I would just name the settings differently. I don't think it's named, Travis, is it namespace? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it's namespace. So each component that is defined in the component.json file has a namespace. So when you're defining it, every setting that you put into it will be under that particular application. So it's namespace in the settings as that as well. And it also uses the root ID in the dev version. So it will go, in case there's other cases where we wanted to, I think it came in the Commonwealth app where we had different layers on we wanted to switch something at the settings layer.
Oh, the type of chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had like a line and a bar, and so I think it was that possibly. But yeah, we have to have that, like you're mentioning, as far as the question goes, with the Commonwealth page that has those 4 React apps, because they are the namespace has to be there because they're leveraging those same values, but they're handling them uniquely with that namespace. And it's the same app. Like I was mentioning when I was showing, it's the same app repeating. It's just using the settings to determine what to show and how to show it.
All right, we are at time for the webinar. I want to thank everybody for making time. If your question was not answered, I will follow up with you directly via email and bring in the folks that need to be brought in. I'm going to just ask everybody on the webinar to save the date. Our next webinar is actually going to be me. I'm going to be talking about RFP writing. So all of you devs on this call, if you could tell your folks to join the RFP writing project webinar, we can make more successful projects for you going forward. All of that being said, we have recorded this webinar. We are really happy to share it. We'll be putting it up on YouTube later and posting a link to the YouTube video in the follow-up email to each of you. And just two quick notes. One is in the follow-up email, there will be a survey. We would love to hear your feedback. This is a new webinar series for us, and we want to improve it going forward. And second is we made a slight schedule change to the webinars going forward. Rather than running them every 2 weeks, we are going to be running our webinars on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month to make them a little bit more predictable going forward. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.